been such a fun Monday morning. Thanks for coming out even in the rain. Start of a great week here in Twin Cities. It's going to be great. So this is Honest Studios. My name is Joel, and I am co-owner of a creative agency called Honest Media, and we run this brand, Honest Studios. It's a co-working space, an event space, a rentable photo studio, and we just started in June, and we have just been blown away at all of the traction here in Minneapolis, the people that have rallied around. It has been so much fun. So enjoy the space, get some coffee. We have donuts provided by Cardigan Donuts, which is probably the best donut shop in the cities, in my opinion. In the Skyway, so amazing. But feel free to use the space all week for the startup. We didn't officially put it on the website, but we're opening our doors. You guys can come by anytime. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to have you work out of this space. So we're really excited. Meredith is one of our members here, and she's going to be giving the talk. She has incredible things to say. We're so glad that she can use this and give a talk on scaling within. So before she speaks, we're going to have another sponsor come up, share a little bit about it, and then she's going to go right into it.
Hey,
so
Joel.
Thank you guys so much for being here.
Jill, do you want to hear the Wi-Fi code, people?
Yeah, if you want the Wi-Fi is BNL is the network, and then the password is BNL Hive OCT1. I know it's a little bit confusing. We're about to change it. BNL Hive OCT1. So that is the password to the Wi-Fi.
Thanks.
Super important stuff, guys.
Oh, yeah.
How's it going? My name's Antonio. So I am the co-founder and CEO of an organization called We Are Active. So We Are Active, we work right out of that window right there, this little room right there. But we are a group of entrepreneurs, digital marketers, content creators, and event planners that are focused on helping brands stand out and scale in the digital space. And I actually work with Meredith on a weekly basis, and the stuff she's going to talk about today is super transformative, not only for yourself as an individual, but like for myself when I'm overseeing a team of 6 other people and multiple things moving in a trillion different directions. The concepts she will bring up today really help to kind of transform your team as well. And I think it's super important as a leader that you really set the bar for the culture of your organization. And when you do it from a place of self-awareness, it changes everything. So with that, I'll get Meredith up here.
Do you want me to? I can try it again. Momentary technical difficulty. Okay, thank you everybody for coming. Is this your first event of the week?
Yep.
Yeah, anyone else go to anything this morning? A few of you? Yes. A few of here. I did one session this morning at 8 a.m. and so there's a few repeat attenders even though it's the same session. So hopefully it means it's useful content. So everyone, thank you for coming. What I would love to have you do right away, if you're willing and able, is to stand up. If you still are eating a donut, sorry for pausing that experience for a second. But what I always love to do is to have people start out with just a little body movement. So what I like to do is just have you just kind of go back and forth. Might feel a little silly, but everyone else is doing it. And something like this, it just kind of is nice to brush off the gloom of the day and all the stuff from this weekend and just kind of reorient into the present moment. And then one thing I'm excited about to let you know that I will announce at the end is that I have kind of a cool giveaway at the very end. So that is something at the end of the presentation. I'll give you a link to a website where you can fill out an entry form. So that's why I wanted you to have the Wi-Fi code for that point. All right, so get all your final jiggles out and wiggles, and any dramatic ones are fine. Yep, that was good, thank you. All right, so first off, I would love to hear from just a couple of you why you're here. From all the events to choose from, and there's many more to come, but what made you decide to come to this event? What from the title or the description stood out to you? What are you hoping to get out of it? whether or not I'm able to deliver on that, I'd love to know what brought you here. So if you can project, and stand up if you want to, but you don't have to if you can project. All right, you.
I think that the inner journey of entrepreneurship is one of the more fascinating and it doesn't get enough attention, is what I'm trying to say. And I think the external game is the thing that has really easily, calculated metrics, things that we can identify as big milestones along the journey. But the inner game of it is potentially so impactful and it influences not only the experience you have, but the results you get. And so I'm super excited to get some wisdom from Meredith on all that.
Thank you. So what brought you is kind of the inner journey of entrepreneurship and how little that's covered and how interesting that part is. All right, anyone else? What brings you here today? Yes.
I work for a local small company that's been scaling quite a bit in the last couple of years and is going to continue growing. And I'm a big part of adding an entire new side of our business. And so I'm here to look at strategies, and I know that's going to be a challenge I'm currently having and will continue to have.
Okay, so you're a part of a company that's currently scaling, you're helping with a new division, and so wanting input strategies for how to do that more effectively. Okay, anyone else, what brought you here today or what you're hoping to get out of it?
I left a company about 6 months ago where kind of a bad point in how we were scaling really kind of detonated the management team of which I was a part. And I just feel like there are things I can learn to help smooth through those difficult transitions in the future. And so I've been really thinking about that ever since I left.
Yeah, so you were a part of a company that was scaling and reached a lot of pain points. And that's the thing, is because we might have the skills for what we're doing, but a lot of what throws us off is the people dynamics and the emotional situations. Anyone else have that experience where it's the people stuff that kind of gets in the way? Can't live with them, can't live without them. All right, anyone else that wants to add to what you hope to get out of today or what brought you to this session? Yeah.
I work at a high-growth startup and am a leader there, so I constantly feel the pressure of trying to make the right decisions in terms of where I spend my time, and then balancing that against personal responsibilities. It's this constant feeling of being torn between multiple things, and I'd love to somehow feel like I'm in better control of that.
Thank you. So yeah, you are a leader at a high-growth startup, and so managing all the pain points and managing people and overseeing things and how to have more capacity to do that. Okay, so very fascinating, and I'm hoping to be able to touch on a lot of those different points. So first I'm going to give you just a little context or background about me and what scaling within is and this topic. So basically, scaling within is the name of the work that I do. And what I do is I work with a lot of founders, CEOs, visionaries, startup people in general, whether they're the leaders or the people getting ready to launch something, or a lot of times workshops with teams. But basically, it's one thing to have a good idea and to want to bring it to the world. It's another thing to try to actually build and grow a business. It's another thing to have to hire people. It's another thing to have to manage people, build an effective team, all of the other pain points that keep coming up along the way. And so kind of the concept between scaling within or behind that is most people, especially in the startup world, is your goal is to scale what you're doing, to bring it to the world, to mass produce it. And how I think about it is I can't actually scale externally until I first scaled on the inside, which means I've expanded my internal capacity to be built on. Because the demands are continually so increasing over time, what I've done in the past might have worked before, but it's not working anymore. So I think of it sometimes like a developmental process, like the way that you parent a 10-year-old is different than a 2-year-old. Maybe you're going to tie your 2-year-old's shoe for them, but if you're still tying your 16-year-old shoe, You're doing the same motion, and it was helpful when they were 2, but it's no longer helpful. And so having that awareness is of even when you're starting out and trying to get any opportunity or have anyone see what you're doing, to then later when you've actually launched off the ground and are busy all the time with so many demands that to say yes to one thing means to say no to 100 other things. And how do you actually make that transition over time or actually have the awareness to do that? So the work that I do mostly is individual consulting, and so it's a space for a lot of leaders to work through. It's kind of like a hybrid between counseling, coaching, and consulting. So they can work through whether it's issues in their relationship at home that are coming up, whether it's parenting concerns, whether it's client drama, employee drama, reconnecting to their core vision, or sometimes you have a level of success and then kind of forget who you are in the midst of it, or okay, now things are stabilized and I'm not in this constant surging mode, and now I don't know what to do with myself when I'm not constantly surging ahead. And so my background is as a therapist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I did that for about 10 years before I shifted into the marketplace. And in that background, I worked with a lot of complex trauma and PTSD, and through that learned a lot about neurobiology and a lot of really helpful things that right now are kind of stuck in the trauma world, but they're useful to every single person. So the things I'm going to teach you about today, I'm very excited about, because even though it sounds complex neurobiology, it's actually very, very simple and easy, and it's something that once you see it, you can't unsee it, which is great. It's actually going to create a new framework in your brain that will transform how you view yourself, your relationships, and other things as you go forward. So really, the foundation for being able to scale within is self-awareness. Because if you don't have awareness about what's happening on the inside of you, you can't do anything different. You will always react out of the same patterns. So it's not only having the awareness to recognize what's happening in you, but also even your company, where your company is at in a developmental process. Because again, back to the shoe analogy, that worked at one stage of development, but if you're doing that same thing for your kid at 16, you're hurting them. And so how do we have the awareness to recognize that something helped us in the past, or it helped us survive, but in order to thrive in the next season, it's not doing it anymore. And we can't even gauge that or recognize that unless we have a framework that it is a developmental process, not only individually, but also as a company. And so that's the other kind of imagery behind scaling within, is I also picture scaling within to be almost scaling an internal mountain. I'm climbing up this mountain of reaching the peaks of what I'm capable in life, or what I can offer. It's kind of like in Mario Brothers. That's the only video game I played growing up. But in that, you're always trying to level up. So you learn the different skills, and then you conquer the bad guy, and then you go to the next level. And then if you die from that level, you don't go all the way back to the start, you just go back to the beginning of that level. So part of it is recognizing what internal level we're on, and recognizing when we're hitting a ceiling. So when I'm hitting something in me that served me in the past, but I need more skills, I need more emotional maturity, I need more awareness to go forward. And so I'm hitting that ceiling and growing in awareness, and then being intentional about what do I need to overcome that, so that my former ceiling, what used to be the thing I'm just trying to attain and build up to, is now my floor. What used to be my ceiling is now my foundation. It's what I'm standing on, and I'm in a whole new territory that then I get to grow in and explore and conquer that until I get to the next level. Because how many of you have your own business in here? Raise your hand. Okay, how many of you are part of some sort of fast growth company or team? So anything, whether you're having your own business or you're part of a fast growth team, there's so much, and it goes so fast, and it's crazy and hectic and wild, and there's so many stages in it. It never stops. And so you're continually needing to refine your capacity, pause and gain perspective, and keep moving forward. So that being said, the thing I'm going to teach about is a really simple framework that comes from neurobiology that's actually going to help you grow in self-awareness. Because again, the concept of scaling within is great, but you can't really do that unless you have self-awareness. So this is kind of the foundation for the work. And the cool thing is, if you'll see this image, and it'll make more sense over time, but on your seats I put business cards, because on the back is the same logo, and it's kind of a visual that a lot of people, after they learn about this, they draw it all the time or have it as a reference point to help them. So again, that will make more sense once you learn about it and I teach on it, but I just wanted to let you know that those are on your seat so that you can use that as a reference point in the future as a bookmark or something, or you can throw it away. Either way, it's available for you. All right, so this is a rendering of something called the window of tolerance. And that is a concept, again, that comes from neurobiology. And so basically, everyone has a window. When you're in your window, you're in that middle zone. You're between those two layers. So when you're operating from your window, you're accessing your most optimal self. You're accessing the wisest, kindest part of who you are. If you think about times in your own life when you really felt alive and really felt clear and in it, or operating out of your most professional, capable self, that's when you are operating from your window. I want you guys right now to think about, or even just in your mind's eye, a time when you knew you were operating from your most optimal self. Whether it was in a business situation, whether it was on vacation on a jet ski, or someplace where you felt fully yourself. Can everyone think of that? Okay, so that's something to keep in mind, because the more that you can, over time, today is a slight intro, there's so much more to this, but just as a trick for the future, the more you can kind of anchor into when you're accessing your most optimal self, that's something that you can leverage in the future. So even having a mental image of a time where you definitely knew you were operating from that place, that's something that you can help access from in the future. So a little more about being in your window. When you are operating from your window, your prefrontal cortex is online. So that's a part of your brain that's not fully developed until around age 26, which to me is fascinating to think of how many people are making a ton of major life decisions before 26. It's the part of your brain that can see from a higher perspective. This sounds kind of funny, and I can't prove this at all, but I've always been a fairly aware person, and I can remember around the time that I turned that age, it was almost like another layer in my brain. The way that I could make sense of situations, it was from a little bit higher perspective. I didn't get caught up in the same things. It was almost like, oh, I can see that from a higher place. So even you're thinking, how can I see things from a higher vantage point? It's more the forest view than being stuck in the trees. That part of your brain, it allows you to be emotionally informed, but also access logic and reason. Because when you're a kid, for example, you can't really access higher thinking. Kids are super concrete. They just take things very literally. And one example I use a lot is, let's say there's a little boy whose father treats him poorly and is verbally abusive to him. So his father says, "You good-for-nothing idiot, you'll never make anything of yourself." That little boy doesn't have access to a prefrontal cortex yet. He doesn't have access to higher understanding. He has no ability to go, oh, dad's just having a bad day and he's taking that out on me. Or his father treated him poorly and he's just repeating the pattern. Instead, that little boy is just going to absorb it like an emotional sponge. He won't be able to make a narrative around that. It'll get stored in his body and an emotional memory, but not connected to a logical narrative. For example, I could ask each of you what you did yesterday. You could pull it up in your brain and tell me. Or I could ask you, what was a time recently where someone made you super angry? And you could recall it and tell me about what happened and how you felt. Little kids, maybe if you coach them, they can get language for their feelings, but they don't have the same ability to make a narrative about that on their own. They're just going to absorb it, again, like an emotional sponge. And that's why sometimes you can, you go on in life and develop, and you can most of the time be very professional and capable, and then suddenly you enter a situation, either for yourself or someone you know, where something triggers it emotionally a little bit, and you fly out of your window, which I'll talk about that shortly, but suddenly you're seeing the lens from as if you were an 8-year-old or a 16-year-old, or the other person. A few minutes ago you were talking to an adult, and now they're just breaking down, and it's like their logic and reason is more like a teenager. Has anyone ever experienced anything like that, either for themselves or someone they know? I see a lot of little smiles and nods. Yeah, so we all have. This is why it's really important to know about the window and have awareness, and why it's so important to operate out of here, because literally, when that thing happens, you're taken out of your window, your prefrontal cortex shuts down, and you're seeing the world through the lens of your brain neurology from whenever that wounding got imprinted. So you're literally dealing with a situation from the mental state of an 8-year-old or a 16-year-old, which is really helpful to know, because a lot of the complex decisions we have to make, complex relational things we have to work through, or scenarios with loved ones, those aren't things that 8-year-olds or 16-year-olds can properly work through. So I'm going to keep explaining this, but there's 2 ways that you can go out of your window. Oops, wrong way. Okay, so if you are prone to bump out the top of your window, you go into a state of hyperarousal. Hyperarousal is more like an anxiety type feeling. Everyone's going to experience it a little differently, but it's more like fast beating heart, something called catastrophic thinking. That's something where your mind starts spinning out of control. Like, if this goes wrong, then this will happen, and then I'll lose my job, and then I'll never make it in life, and then, has anyone ever had catastrophic thinking in here? Yep, where your thoughts start to spiral out of control. Other things that might feel like, you just start to feel kind of afraid, worried. There's lots of physical symptoms that go. Even if you can tell with my body movements, even as I'm explaining it, it's kind of more rigid and tensed up. It's not before I was at ease and calm, and now it's kind of clenched. Again, everyone's going to experience a little bit differently, but basically, when you're in a state of hyperarousal, you're accessing a fight or flight response. You're in a trauma state of your brain. If you're walking down the street and someone scary or threatening starts chasing you, that's when you want your prefrontal cortex to shut down. That's the time to fight them or run away. It's not the time to access the higher part of your brain and go, I wonder what happened to them this morning, or what put them in a bad mood. Why are they chasing me? You don't want to access your higher brain then. So that state, or this state below, which I'll explain, those are appropriate responses when we are in a threatening situation. It's just that there's a lot of situations in life that aren't truly threatening, but our muscle memory easily pokes us out of our window. If you go to the bottom, drop out the bottom, it's a state of hypoarousal. So whereas the top is more anxiety, the bottom is more depressive type, or it's more going low, shutting off. I'm not going to feel anything, or I don't care anymore. It's cutting off your emotions altogether, just being frozen. The top is fight or flight, the bottom is a freeze response. I'm just curious in general for you guys, just hearing this so far, what is your tendency? I want you to raise your hand if your tendency is the hyper place. Yeah, okay. Any hypos in here? Okay. So what's interesting about this is we all have a tendency, and sometimes it can look different. So some people always tend one way or the other, or for some people, they go so high up and fly up in their thoughts that they can't sustain it, and then they drop out the bottom and shut off. Or sometimes maybe in a relationship pattern, one of you goes up, and once the other person goes off, you counterbalance by shutting down, and then you're in a gridlock. Or for some people, when they go out of their window, they look like they're low, so to the world they look shut off and cut off and like they don't care or shut down, but inside they're actually in a hyper state, even though they look like that. Really good to know about. Why this is important, again, is because the number one goal, if you can recognize that you're not in your window, is to get back in. Because if you operate from not within your window, you actually can't access the higher part of your brain. Your starting point determines your end point. So I'm sure all of you, or right now even, think about a significant person in your life, someone that you've worked through a lot of stuff in the past, and think of something that was a challenging issue, but you were able to talk and work through it and make progress. Even though it was hard, you understood each other, you came through the other side and felt closer. Can you guys think of a time like that? Okay, think of the same person and the time you tried to work through something else hard and it blew up in your face. Ever had that happen? No? Not here? Okay, yeah, so, yeah, times where it just didn't go well. Why that works is because if it didn't go well, one or both of you were not in your window at the time. Someone got triggered and went out of their window, whether it was you or the person. So when I worked with complex trauma and PTSD, if someone was coming into my office and they wanted to work through a past trauma, if they were in their window, we could work through it and they could actually get healing and move forward. But if they were in a hyper state or a hypo state and were to talk through their past trauma, it would only re-imprint the trauma in the brain. And so the majority of what we would work on is actually resourcing so that they could even get to their window in the first place. I use that example because it's more of a clear extreme image, but if you think about that, the implications in all of our daily lives are massive. Even if you think of relational interactions with coworkers or a loved one where you get in the same pattern over and over, butting heads, or you just get in the same really unfun cycle of communication, both of you or one of you are getting triggered and you're just re-imprinting the same path over and over. And this is why self-awareness is key, because if we don't have awareness, we can't do anything different. We just keep going around the same mountain over and over again. I don't even know what this is called, but there's those, you know those toy train tracks where they're the little puzzle pieces that you build this track around? So if you picture that and it's just a circular path and you just keep going around the same thing over and over and over, suddenly you learn about the window of tolerance. And then appears one of those Y pieces. That's what I don't know what they're called, but they're a little connector piece. So rather than going around the same thing over and over, you have the split second where you can either go the same way or you can go a new way you've never gone before. And that's what we're entering into, is the ability to act from intention rather than reaction. When we go to up there or down there, we're just reacting and we don't actually have control. But if we grow in self-awareness, we actually can operate from intention. We can choose a different way. We're not a slave to our circumstance or a victim of the situation we're in. So there's a few things about that. One, just learning about the window is going to help you. Like I said, you can't unsee this. This is almost like a permanent branding in your mind of situations, or it's a new framework you never had before that you can recognize, oh, I'm coming from a good place right now, or I'm starting to get anxious, or I'm shutting down. Or you can recognize if a conversation with someone is going sour, probably they got triggered in